Dominance, pure dominance. I think the mic is now working, but BYU handles their business against the TCU Horned Frogs and shows that they are still a force to be reckoned with in the Big 12 Conference. This is Postcast, recapping BYU's rout of TCU.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Trying a new thing tonight. We've got multi-aspect ration, and I got a situation here where we're trying something new here. So thank you for bearing with me as you test new things out. But BYU gets a dominant win over the TCU Horned Frogs. I'm Jake Hatch, host of Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider here, talking all things Cougars every single day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, which is America's #1 sports podcast network. All right, so BYU handles their business and absolutely destroys the TCU Horned Frogs. And got to say, sitting there at LaVell Edwards Stadium watching this game play out, I was very, very impressed by BYU. I think it's far and away BYU's most dominant, complete Big 12 game to date. And yes, that includes the win over Utah. Just think about how BYU controlled this game essentially from the opening kickoff. They went right down the field. Now, they could have had a touchdown on that first drive, but they get the 3 points. And then the next 7 straight drives until the fourth quarter, BYU was not held off the scoreboard and really show what they're capable of to a national audience on ESPN. They're now 9-1 overall. They're 6-1 in conference, and everything BYU is playing for right now. Speaking of a Big 12 title game appearance, a chance to win a Big 12 championship, to go to the college football playoff, it's still all within their control. And that's the good news for the Cougars is they keep winning. They keep fending off all comers, and that includes Utah, etc. They will handle their business and find themselves playing in the Big 12 title game now if they go 2-0 down the stretch here. And I really thought that BYU came out in this game against TCU with something to prove. You could tell that they were upset with their performance a week ago in that loss to Texas Tech, and they understood the assignment. Speaking of this week's game against TCU, they needed to go out there and put on a performance that was going to, I think, reassure Cougar fans and also show the national media / the college football playoff committee that they are still the team that many thought they were ahead of that Texas Tech game. They had an off day, no doubt, down there in Lubbock, and that will be held against them when it comes to their resume. But wins of this variety over TCU, there are ones that are absolutely going to help BYU's case as well. So I really do think that the situation at hand here for BYU is just keep winning and essentially bust down that door, force the college football playoff committee to tell you no. And I'd have a hard time having a playoff committee tell an 11-1 BYU team going into the conference championship game, should they get to that point, that no, you're not worthy of playing in the college football playoff. And if it does come to that, trust me, I, along with many others, will be screaming to high heavens about how unfair the system is at that point. But let's not worry about that quite right now. Now, the bigger point is that BYU did their thing, and that is just control this game right from the get-go. And that was the positive for BYU. It was a thorough win and dominant essentially in all facets of this game. Offense piled up 447 yards, and had they not taken their foot off the gas in the fourth quarter, we can get to that in a minute about taking your foot off the gas in the fourth quarter, BYU easily could have piled up 500, maybe 600 yards of offense. It really was that thorough of an offensive showing. Defensively, they yielded 298 yards, 183 passing, 115 rushing. So not necessarily dominant numbers in terms of the overall yards, but 13 points. That is dominance. And Shamil, you asked if you want to talk about the basketball team some. We will get that in just a little bit. So kind of a dual postcast tonight, but we're going to start off on the football front. And I do think that this is a BYU game that is going to have those who in the national media probably went to bed. It's an honest truth of the matter. When you're playing at 10:15 on the East Coast, there are national pollsters out there who go to bed, wake up on Sunday morning, look at the scores, and then vote accordingly, maybe watch some highlights. Well, this is a score that's going to look very favorably for BYU as they handled this right from the jump. And that's the good news, is that the Cougars didn't let TCU have any chance in this game. I know that TCU scored 10 points in that second quarter, and really that only touchdown, it was an incredible play call because they made you think, speaking of Josh Hoover, that he was going to essentially do like a tush push or a QB sneak on that play. It was like a quick pitch to the outside, and they scored on a touchdown on that. And that was a great play call. That's the only touchdown that TCU scored in this game. 2 other field goals, and really, that was it for this TCU squad. And I do think the BYU is going to be looked at more favorably with this victory. Now, circumstances being what they are with the college football playoff, there were teams in front of BYU you wanted to see lose. Those included the likes of Oklahoma. Those also included teams kind of right behind them in the standings as well, who are members of the Big Ten, like a USC, that are going to be looked at favorably with their victories as well. But so long as BYU keeps winning, that's all you really can do at this point, and that handle your business on that front. A couple of players I want to talk about. We're going to get to your comments here in just a little bit, so stay tuned for that. But Bear Bachmeier, 23 of 33, 296 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions. That's a tidy 70% completion percentage with a QB rating of 155. I think his QB rating, the ESPN and others put out was in the 96 and change territory, so it's pretty elite numbers there. LJ Martin looks no worse for the wear. Maybe he is feeling a lot better. I hope he is, because he looked a lot better in this game. Had 25 touches overall in the game, 21 carries, 88 yards, averaging 4.2 yards per carry. Bear Bachmeier is BYU's second leading scorer with 10 carries for 59 yards. And then Parker Kingston, 4 for 13. All 3 of those players scoring touchdowns on the ground for BYU in this victory. And had BYU been able to cash in a few more touchdowns versus the field goals that they had, BYU easily probably could have broke 50 points. And I do need to give a shout out. Late in this game, Tanner Wall, what an effort from that young man. Gets an interception and absolutely hoofs it 60 some odd yards up the field and dives into the end zone. His first career pick six, his first touchdown, as he said, since his senior season of high school football in 2017. It's been nearly 8 years since he had scored. So it's a good night if you're a Cougar fan. Absolute dominance, and they showed everything that I think you could have hoped they could have showed out there on this night out at LaVell Edwards Stadium. 64,000 plus once again packing the stands. And not going to lie, very few people left their seats until kind of midway through that fourth quarter when this game was very much in hand for BYU. And I do love the fact that Cougar fans and those of you who are at the game, etc., I do love the fact that y'all showed up in droves to support your Cougars. That shows that BYU fans, they're the hardiest of the hardy, and they stuck around. It's a bit of a party at LaVell's house tonight, and that's a very, very good thing, is that it shows that BYU knows what their fans are there for, and they want to put on a show for their fans. Tanner Wall said in the post-game press conference, I was sitting right there, he said, you schedule us at 8:15 at night, and we're more often than not going to win these football games. They love playing under the lights at LaVell, and that's a really, really nice thing to see for BYU. And Bullseye, I can say this, I'll never cheer for Utah. I don't care what it means for BYU. At this point, Bullseye, you don't got to cheer for Utah whatsoever. You don't have to cheer for the Utes whatsoever. BYU wins out. There's nothing that Utah can do to make up the ground to play in the Big 12 title game. BYU at 11-1 will be in Arlington playing Texas Tech in a rematch on December 6th. That is what's there for BYU. You've got to go win the game. That's all you got to worry about next week against Cincinnati, the following week against UCF. So long as you win out, you're playing in Arlington, and there's nothing those sniveling Ute fans can do about it. So, now, I want to get you guys' comments momentarily. I do also want to give a quick shout out defensively real quick for some of the players that stood out to me in this game. I thought Isaiah Glasker, it was very quiet, but he tied for the team high with 6 tackles yesterday, a QB hit in this game. We saw Tausili Akana. I want to give a shout out to that young man. His best game, I thought, in a Cougar uniform to date. 4 total tackles, 3 of them solo, a half sack, 2.5 tackles for loss, and another quarterback hit for Tausili Akana. He's a transfer in from Texas. He, along with Nusi Taumwe Apeo, who also had 4 tackles, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss. they were bringing the heat off of the edge for BYU. And it looks like the pass rush for BYU, the revolution, it's kind of starting. And the young bucks, guys like Nusi Tamoyapao, Tausili Akana. I also thought that we saw moments from guys like Kenny Laufono-Hema as well as Hunter Clegg, all bringing the heat off the edge, but it doesn't accept the fact that you see a guy like Keanu Tanavasu, who he said himself post-game, he thought he had his best performance to date. So had a sack in this game, absolutely was walking guys back into the quarterback's lap. That center from TCU will not live that one down in film review as they show him getting just absolutely dog walked right back into Hoover's lap. So I thought the defensive line as a whole had a really good night, but those are some of the guys that stood out to me. All right. We'll get to your guys' comments momentarily. I do also want to talk a little bit about BYU basketball. It's coming up as well because what looked like a game that BYU may find themselves getting absolutely boat raced by the UConn Huskies turned into quite the finish down the stretch. And we'll talk about all that as we continue on right here on a postcast edition of Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, NBA is obviously here, and the best part about FanDuel is they are the official sports betting partner of the NBA. They've got all kinds of options for you guys when it comes to your sports betting needs, whether you're all in on over-unders, player props, season totals. They got everything for you guys. It's not just basketball, football, baseball. Feels like Tiddlywinks might also be on the list there from our friends over at FanDuel. As far as even if it's the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, they have got the live bets to keep everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. And it's all there for you guys. You combine those live bets into a same game parlay and get a bigger payout along the way. And it keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to sign up today and play your game with FanDuel. They are the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network America's #1 sports podcast network. Appreciate all of your guys' patronage. I got a bunch of you watching this live, not as many as we typically do because it's a little bit later at night, but if you haven't done so already, right here on YouTube, if you're watching this live, click that thumbs up icon. It helps the algorithm, helps us build this audience that we've got going here, and obviously keeps y'all engaged, hopefully, throughout this show tonight. All right, so looking at the situation at hand for BYU, there's a number of you worried about how far Alabama drops, BYU moving up. I think BYU probably moves up one spot tonight, and that's because Texas is going to drop, and they should drop like a stone, even though they did lose to number 5 Georgia. It's still, they lost, and Texas, for all intents and purposes, their hopes of a playoff are out. So I think you can safely say bye-bye to the Longhorns, the preseason #1 team in the country at that. Their hopes have been kind of extinguished here, but the other teams around BYU that you were kind of hoping would lose, the likes of Notre Dame against Pitt, Alabama against Oklahoma, those did not go in BYU's direction in terms of having the teams right in front of them, speaking of the Oklahoma Sooners and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, lose those games. So, yeah, I do think those of you pointing out that BYU going 11-1, guy says it here, hopefully we move to 11. I wonder how far Alabama drops. If Bama drops more than 2 or 3 spots, I'd be really stunned. But you never know. We'll see what happens with the playoff committee. Now, I did read right before I went live that Heather Dinich from ESPN, she has BYU number 11 in her projection of the CFP rankings coming up on Tuesday night. She's got Utah at 12, but as she notes, there are no ACC teams or G6 teams that are in those rankings. So essentially, you have to be 10 or better to get in that large bid right now, because conference champions from one of the best G6 conference champion and the ACC champion, they are going to be in the playoffs. And that looks like the American and the ACC will and so essentially 11 and 12 spots are going to have you on the outside looking in, even though you're ranked in those spots. So that's what BYU's got to fight for down the stretch here, is to find a way into the top 10 of the national rankings. You do that going into conference championship weekend, I think irregardless, regardless, apologies, I'm used to DJ and PK, but regardless of the outcome of that conference championship game, they have shown that those aren't really going to affect you in terms of where you're placed, but you got to handle your business from here on out and hope that, unlike this weekend, there's some chaos in the final 2 weekends of the season that go BYU's way, because this weekend could have gone a lot better for BYU, if we're being blunt about it, because it would have been fun to see them have some of those teams in front of them drop and then drop behind BYU. But if you move to 11 this week, there's still everything to chase. You beat Cincinnati. I think you just kind of keep inching your way up. And yeah, like I said, if you're 10 or better come the final rankings, that's good enough. I think you will have a hard time getting thrown out on your rear end, speaking of the College Football Playoff Committee. And I'll reiterate something I said early on in today's podcast. If, and it's an if still, because BYU's got to do their part, but if BYU is 11-1 going into conference championship weekend, and let's say they put on a fairly respectable performance, even if they lose in the rematch against Texas Tech, the playoff committee is going to cast BYU aside a second straight season with 11 wins. I'm going to be shouting it from the rooftops that this is corrupt. It's messed up, but we'll get to that when we get to that. So I do think there's a lot of things going on right now. Now, when it comes to other things, okay, RJ has a good point here. R. Johnson says, I don't think people realize how bad Cincinnati screwed us over, because if we lose next week, Utah wins the tiebreaker. Cincinnati loss is the best thing that happened to Utah all year. I'm disgusted. It does hurt that Cincinnati lost to Arizona, and it also it screams all the more that if Arizona can go to Cincinnati and win, BYU, in theory, should be able to go into Nippert Stadium and win that game next week. Brandon Sorsby is a fantastic quarterback. I got no problem saying that. He's much like Josh Hoover. But if a program like Arizona that BYU is beaten can do that, BYU should be able to handle their business as well. And as they continue to win, that's all that matters, is BYU winning. Don't worry about anything else right now. I know that we kind of want to watch the conference race, and you do have to keep it kind of on the periphery. But the good news for BYU is, I keep saying it, win and you are in. That's all that matters right now. Now, it's a good point by Caleb here. Really hope they don't let this win go to their heads. You know Cincinnati is going to be out for blood because Cincinnati's lost back-to-back games now. You cannot allow this to get back to your get into your head thinking that, hey, we're all the way back. Speaking of the BYU players, because if they allowed that, they allowed the big-headedness to get to them, man, this team's got something coming for them. So the vibe I got after this game is that BYU understands what they're up against. And Guy points this out. Committee should not have dropped us 5 slots. Here's the deal. The history with BYU and the College Football Playoff Committee is if BYU loses a game, for some reason, it's held against them more than almost anybody. I mean, anybody, Big 12 included, other teams in the Big 12 included, that BYU gets dropped like a stone. So I do think that it's a really, really interesting dynamic that we're going to see at play here down the stretch here. A lot of people behind BYU in the standings, Utah, Houston, Cincinnati, they want nothing more than to see BYU drop a game. And if BYU drops a game, that's on them, because all of a sudden then you're opening the door to other teams sniping that spot away from you when it comes to the Big 12 title game. So you got to go out there and win your games in front of you. And so long as you do that, that will help you. Now, that's a good point by C. Will here. Sorsby is limping really bad during that game. You're right. I did watch that game, and Sorsby is a warrior. He was battling something in that game. And I don't know if that was an injury coming into the game, something he picked up a mid-game, but he was struggling. Still dealing with a mic issue here, so apologies that we're still dealing with that. But the situation at hand here is just handle your business if you're BYU. Good point here by Psycho Cougar. You think BYU can get an at-large bid even if they lose to Tech again? The history of the College Football Playoff Committee says that if you go into conference championship game weekend and you're in an at-large spot, even if you typically lose that conference championship game, unless you have a quarterback or something that goes down like a horrific injury, they're not going to hold that against you. Conference championship games are not there to knock you out of the playoff. They're just kind of there to see who is ultimately the champion of the league. Now, champions get the automatic berths, obviously, but the history says that if you are inside that top 10 for BYU come conference championship weekend, there's going to be a hard time for them to throw you out on your rear end, speaking of BYU. So I do think that so long as BYU just keeps winning, you're right there. So yeah, Kojoy, yeah, this is live. Hi, I'm waving at you. I don't know what to tell you. I do these after every game, so I am live. So like that shit, click that thumbs up icon. And if you're hate watching this, because apparently we got some hate watchers in here, got some Utah fans that are checking out the show. So as always appreciate people watching the show, no matter if you're hate watching or otherwise, but it's always good to kind of react to these games. Now, a couple other points here as we move forward here. Okay, this is interesting from Caden Prowse. Before Harlan was on the committee, I would say yes. Now we have to win the conference if we want in the playoff. Now, let's just put it this way, Caden. The Big 12 needs as many voices speaking for the Big 12. And if Harlan is if Harlan's on that committee, he's got to be stumping for the Big 12 conference. Now, you may think it's a conspiracy theory. I said it earlier this week, for those of you who are everydayers, that no matter how this is going to go with Mark Harlan on the College Football Playoff Committee, it's going to be an interesting dynamic here, because he's obviously got his university, speaking of the University of Utah, in contention. BYU, who's got the head-to-head win over the Utes, is also there, and the committee has shown that head-to-head results do matter. That's kind of the backstop that's helping BYU stay in front of Utah, and it's going to be interesting to see what all happens, because he has to recuse himself from talking about Utah. He cannot be in the room when they talk about the Utes, but he's able to be in the room when it comes to BYU, and you would think that he's got a directive from the conference itself we need as many teams in this playoff as possible. Do your darndest to help us out. And maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but we'll see what happens. So since wasn't Cincinnati's loss kind of a good for BYU? It increases their chance to go to the Big 12 championship. Yes, it does. It does help their chance to go to the conference championship. But let me reiterate one point. I'm not as worried about watching the standings right now, because BYU, they control everything. Everybody behind them is rooting for BYU to lose. So long as BYU wins, that will get them everything that they're playing for. So I get all of that, and I get why the concern is there. But if you're BYU, there's no looking behind you. You look forward, you focus on Cincinnati, and that's all you worry about. You don't worry about anything else. And Kalani was very adamant in saying that he doesn't really care about style points and the like. I think he should worry about style points, because it does matter, I think, to the playoff committee. There is an inherent bias in a way. It's just the eyeball test absolutely matters. And Tanner Wall, thank you for that pick six, because a 44-13 margin looks a whole lot better than 37-13, even though they're both dominant wins. I'm telling you, you score north of 40, it looks a whole lot better. I don't care how it comes. So it would have been nice to see, BYU's offense, I think, put the pedal down in that fourth quarter, but I think we've learned from 10 years of Kalani Sitake at this point, that's just not his MO, even though I wish it were different. All right, so there you go. Thoughts on the BYU football win? I think it was a dominant, clean, thorough victory. BYU took control early, never relinquished it whatsoever. There was no chance that TCU was going to come back and win that game. So Utah is the best win for BYU by far of the Big 12 season. This was the most complete win. I think there's a distinction that can be made there. But the nice part is BYU, they maintain control of everything. I mean, everything they want to achieve this season, and they continue to handle their business. And so long as they keep winning, they're going to have everything still in their control. And like I said, nothing that Utah, Cincinnati, ASU, Houston, etc., behind them in the standings can do about it. BYU wins, they're in. Now, we're going to finish up this postcast talking a little BYU basketball. For those of you who didn't see it, at 5 o'clock, so ahead of the BYU football game, BYU basketball was playing in Boston at TD Garden against the UConn Huskies in the home of the Boston Celtics, and it turned into quite the raucous affair. And we're going to talk about that as we wrap up this edition, postcast edition, kind of both BYU football and basketball all in one right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at A Game Time. Now, if you guys want tickets to events, whether it's BYU football games, concerts, theaters, no matter concert theater tickets, I should say, anything you want to go to in terms of events, they're all there for you guys, courtesy of our friends over at Game Time. The best part about Game Time is what you see is what you pay. It's my favorite feature. You go in the app, you see the price, and that's what you're paying. You're not having extra fees, taxes, whatever it is, tacked on at the end. They show you exactly right up front what you're going to pay. The best part is you also can see your exact seat view, so you can make sure that it's going to be the spot you want to sit at whatever venue you happen to be going to. The best part is also have zone deals. Pick the section, They pick the seats. You save money. It's the best part about that. I was going to say it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way that I personally have bought tickets. I want you guys to give it a shot as well. Take the guesswork out of buying your tickets and do it with your friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply against the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off from our friends over at Game Time. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Plug for you guys to join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, get the inside scoop on all things BYU sports. It's a great way to interact with the show as well, support the show, and obviously get the insider intel that you guys crave. It's just $5 a month to be a part of the group, and you also get a 14-day free trial before you charge a single penny. Click the link in the show notes below, or hit us up via social media or email, and we'll get you squared away as members of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, so talked football. I want to spend a little bit of time on BYU basketball. It was an 86-84 final for BYU, the 7th-ranked Cougars falling to the 3rd-ranked UConn Huskies. And I've got to say, I watched that entire game. I went down to BYU early to sit in the press box and watch this game play out. And based on the first half of that game, it's incredible. Like, if you think about, take yourself back to, so it tipped off at 5 o'clock. Take yourself back to like a 5:45 p.m. Mountain Time and tell yourself, hey, in like an hour's time, they're going to lose by 2. And you'd be like, what? What did they do? Still dealing with that mic issue. I apologize. I tried to fix it before we went live, but it's not fixing itself. But the point is that BYU basketball, they showed a lot of heart and a lot of fight in this game. And AJ DeBonsa went from a first half he'd rather forget to having a second half, and in particular, the final like 5-ish, maybe final 10 minutes of this game, absolute dominance from that young man. He flashed, I think, all of the skills the NBA wants to see from a future potential number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft. That was really, really impressive to see him come alive, and BYU kind of around him come alive as well. Richie Saunders had moments in that. Dawson Baker, the 3 that Dawson Baker made late in this game was an absolute rainbow off balance. I still don't know that how he made that shot, but yeah, it was a loss, and there's no moral victories. I get all that when it comes to college basketball, but it was good to see BYU show heart, show fight, and show UConn that they're going to be a force in NCAA basketball. And I also want to acknowledge as well, they lost speaking of BYU, they lost obviously Moo Davis, Kennard Davis Jr. had that, was arrested on suspicion of DUI on the way to meet up with the team to fly out to Boston. So he made the trip, but as Kevin Young said, he was suspended for violation of team rules. We'll see what happens in that case with the Provo Police Department. But then Keba Keita on a loose ball, and there was nothing dirty about the play, I didn't think. I thought it was just an inadvertent going for the loose ball, and he takes an absolute just shot to the dome from that. I don't remember who it was from UConn, and looked like he had a concussion. So I do think that it's impressive that BYU fought back, A, overall, and B, without 2 of their starters, and essentially played 30 minutes of this game without Keba Keita. Now, wishing quick healing vibes, whatever it was that Keba Keita dealt with, that he's back in very short order, because he's a very important piece for BYU. Losing him is a tough deal, but it showed what BYU has in the tank to rally without those guys in the lineup. So good point here by Williams Freeman, I think. Ben showed great signs. Tyler Miras, Xavier Staten, Diomande looked playable in big games. I will say that you're right. Tyler Miras, I do think that he earned extra time. It was our first kind of real extended look at what a guy like Xavier Staten is capable of doing. He's still skinny as a rail, but he showed flashes. He really did. I was really impressed with what I saw from him in that game, speaking of Xavier Staten. And Dominic Diomande showed some things as well. Now, late in this game, Guy says it right. Turnover by Rob Wright-Hurd. There was a late turnover that I think all but doomed BYU's chances. It's unfortunate, and that you're going to have to live with that one, because I'm sure Rob Wright was beating himself up about it. You look back at it and say, man, what could have been had you not turned that ball over? And you say it's not blaming him. It's just a fact. It is a fact. That turnover really hurt BYU in this game. Things BYU is going to need to fix, though, in terms of overall play, is BYU made 29 field goals in this game. 7 of them assisted. Less than 25% of your made field goals came off assists. That's not a very sustainable number, and they've got to fix that. BYU, 8 of 26 from 3. The three-point shooting woes kind of continued. They've really only had the one hot half against Delaware shooting the 3. Got to see that become more of a consistent thing for BYU. But they lost by 2 in a game that they ended up shooting 49.2%. I'm telling you, it was sub 40% for long stretches of this game. Whereas UConn, 56.6% from the field overall. They were hot shooting, speaking of the UConn Huskies. And for BYU to have hung in there and only lost by 2, that showed some really, really impressive cojones from BYU. I do think that was an interesting deal. Guy has a good point here. BYU's come more of a one-on-one team. They do play a lot of ISO ball, but I do want to think that BYU needs to play more with the pass. I still think that they're looking like a team that I think the one-on-one has its place, because there are going to be moments BYU needs one-on-one buckets. And that's what a guy like AJ DeBonson or Rob Wright are there for, when you need moments like that. But you do need to see more team-oriented play, I guess is probably the best way to say it. And I think that's why guys like Richie Saunders struggled. He was 0 of 7 from 3 in this game, and that's not a good stat line. 6 of 14 overall, 5 of 6 from the free throw line. So not bad, but 0 of 7 from 3. That's not what Richie wants, nor does anybody want that. So I do think BYU can be much better in terms of playing with the pass a little bit more, but we'll see what happens. I do want to also point out the Hadim Mboop. I think I'm getting that name right. It might be Boop, but he also showed some nice signs in this. Khalil pointed that out in the comments as well. And I do think that it's a game that, despite the loss, BYU showed flashes. Okay, this team, they can hang. They can hang with some of the best teams in the country. And if and when they get that full lineup back together, Keba Keita, let's see if Kennard Davis Jr. gets back on the court sometime relatively soon. I think once this thing really kind of gets in sync, it's going to be a team that's going to be really, really good. And I'm excited for this BYU basketball team. I refuse to be down on them, because had they been beat by 20, yeah, I'd probably be like, okay, that's not a good sign. But final 10 minutes of this game, I don't know how many points they scored. I have to go back and look at that. It felt like they scored at least 30 or so down the stretch, and they made it an absolute incredible run at it. I stood next to a fellow media member watching this kind of play out. And in the press box, it was kind of funny, because there's the media members like myself and others who are trying to be all stoic and, hey, but I'm not going to lie. The threes they hit, you could hear other people in the press box, whoa, ah! Any of you know what a press box is supposed to be about? It's supposed to be a working environment, neutral atmosphere. Well, it was BYU basketball. It's not the football game. It was pretty funny to watch it play out that way. It was kind of interesting to see that kind of dynamic play out, where you had BYU affiliated staff members and the like. They're all just freaking out. And then you also have other media members who are like, oh, a good play there. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, my experience working in the media, just kind of watching that play out. But I do think that it's a good sign that BYU, despite this loss, and I think one of you pointed out earlier, it might have been you, Guy, who said that close losses do matter when it comes to seeding. It's the biggest oxymoron in sports, but quality losses are absolutely a thing in the NCAA tournament selection committees, like calculus, when it comes to seeding teams. That 2-point loss to UConn may help BYU move up a seed line. That is how kind of, like I said, oxymoronic it is to have quality loss on your resume, but that's one of those for BYU, getting that against UConn. So good signs for BYU. Some of you also saying that Mihailo Boskovic doesn't need to ever step on a basketball court again. Here's the thing. Bosco had some really good moments down the stretch last season. Let's withhold judgment. We're just 4 games into the season. There's a long season ahead. There's 30-plus games to go for BYU at minimum, you hope. So I do think that it's too early to be saying that Boskovic needs to be benched. I saw one person say he needs to be a water boy. I think it's too early to cast him aside. I think that Kevin Young has earned the benefit of the doubt. If he's putting Mihailo Boskovic on the court, he knows what Mihailo can bring to the basketball team. He wouldn't be putting him out there if he thought he was an absolute liability. That's just a personal opinion on that matter. So, yeah, good point. The loss to UConn despite the loss to UConn, basically at UConn with 2 starters down, is definitely going to do great things on a resume. Maybe they won't look. I don't know how closely they'll look at that and saying, "Hey, remember BYU was without 2 starters." But I'm telling you, quality losses against a team like UConn who's got a championship pedigree. They've got 6 NCAA titles. It is going to pay benefits for BYU. So I do think that this BYU basketball team showed some really, really positive sides despite that loss. All right, that is going to do it. Big thank you to all of you for tuning in. As always, you guys are absolutely awesome. Thank you for staying up late with me. It's 2:35 p.m. a.m. Mountain Time. I know some of you are probably overseas. Some of you guys check in from all over the world. So truthfully, thank you for all your support. If you wouldn't mind, before you go, click a little thumbs up icon if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you're rewatching this on YouTube, do that as well. Or if you're listening to it wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe, rate and review, share with your family and friends. Do the whole thing. I mention all the time for those of you who are everydayers. It supports the podcast more than you guys know. The algorithms, they rule everything when it comes to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the different players out there. When you guys like the show, rate it, review it, share it, it really does help us build this audience. And we have really got some really good things going here. We're over 15,000 YouTube subscribers. I never thought in my heart of hearts we'd ever get to that number. So truthfully, you guys are absolutely awesome. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for all your support of the podcast. Met a handful of you guys tonight at the football game. I'll give them a quick shout out before we go here. I think I got the notes here somewhere. Let's see. We met Chris tonight, Lon and Elise, Linda and Matt, Lincoln, Dave, Mark, and a handful of more I probably forgot about. But truthfully, you guys, what makes this show go around. So thank you for all your support. And Psycho CD, got church in 7 hours. I've got church in 11 hours. Yeah, 11 hours, 1:30 Mountain Time. So I'm going to go get some sleep. You guys do the same, and we will catch up with you guys Monday. Film review Monday, looking back at both the BYU basketball loss. I'll rewatch that game. I'm also going to rewatch the BYU football game, and I'll have my reaction to both of those on a Monday edition of the podcast. So enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everybody, and we'll catch you guys again soon. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and we'll catch you guys again soon right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.